Okay, first of all, I have to apologize because my wife, Rita, who's not well, could tell you many, many more things. What she did do, and certainly can look at, and if anybody wants it, I have it on the internet, I can send it to you. She was asked to write this article when we came back from our trip in August of 1988. And she wrote it for the Jerusalem Post, but before we left, since the cartoonist Drybone's a good friend of ours, we asked him, because we were early, everything was early like it was this year, to make us a New Year's card that we could give out. And he did. The only thing was his advisor in Russian, we didn't know much at that time, there's something wrong in this wording, and anybody who knows Russian, when they read this wording, they'll realize what the problem is. But what we did was we made about 2,000 copies of this, and we had free run once in the Moscow synagogue because it was during the day, no one was there, and we put them all over. And then in a moment I'll tell you what we did at Babi Yar in Kiev as well. But what I want to say before my story, or half story and a half, is this. For the last 40 years approximately, I've committed myself to attempt to pass on Jewish history, not in the history books per se, but through newspapers, through oral presentations like we're doing tonight. And that to me is a better way, whether it's the right way, I don't know, but it's a better way of telling the story. The reason I say it as follows. I just found in something I wrote for the Post, for the first time that I ever saw it personally, that in November and December of 1942, President Roosevelt permitted Stephen Wise to tell the world. They both knew earlier, but Roosevelt wanted to check it out. But it was announced publicly. Times only carried it on the 10th page, but it was announced publicly at the end of November 1942 that 2 million Jews were dead, exterminated. And every single Anglo-Jewish newspaper in the United States and Canada carried that story, and it was appeared right before the General Assembly of the Federations met in Cleveland in January of it. I would say part of the reason I went to the former Soviet Union, my wife went for a different purpose, but I went because I wanted to say to my children, not to anybody else, but to my children, that if the Jews could not get out of Russia, I did something. I tried to do something. And so we went. And this is what I want to say to you about these people who went, and many others who went, and those of you who knew about it and didn't know about it. The story of our going is not only to be in Hebrew. There's some things written about it in English. But if it is in Hebrew, it's not a text of Shazar. Because many, many jobs I had here, and that was one of the places I worked. What we need to do is for our children and our grandchildren and for Israelis to know that unlike what happened in the United States, I'm not going to talk about any other country, unlike what happened in the United States during World War II, where the Jews were silent, 500 million Jews, 550,000 Jews fought in World War II in the American armies, and 500,000 fought in the Red armies. And they knew something about it. But once I saw, and this was only 6 months ago, that the Jews of America had access to this information and did nothing about it. I didn't know that before I went to the former Soviet Union 25 years ago. But I realized that this story of what we did, even though someone said here They were the ones who worked the hardest, no question about it. But we of this generation decided we were going to try to do what we could. And that's not only the people who went, it's all of you. Rallies and everything like that. But that story is not known. I want to tell you that. That story is not known. Until my grandson, who's studying film, made a movie about my wife's life for her 70th birthday. And we had told him about it. And my wife wrote a 42-page debriefing. But he finally understood. And in that movie, which all my cousins saw and everybody who knew we had gone, they didn't understand, they didn't remember anything. So we need to do more publicly to tell the story. And if we don't, it's going to be forgotten. Somebody will find it in newspapers in 50 years or 100 years. But that shouldn't happen because we're alive and we can pressure so that this story is told. So anyway, that's my preaching. The end is the following. We went to 3 cities, Kishinev, Kiev, and St. Petersburg. We couldn't stay in Moscow. We were through there twice because Reagan and Schultz had been there in the beginning of the summer of '88, and so there were no rooms in Moscow. Fine. Anyway, in Kishinev, that was the worst place because we had been asked to go to a little town called Benderi. Little town meant 100,000 people. There was only one known Jewish family there, probably were others. This one known family, they had no fear whatsoever of anything. So we called them, we went to the post office as we were told in Kishinev, we called them up in Benderi. He said, fine, we'll meet you. And we go to the desk, because we didn't have a car. We had to get public transportation. We went to the desk, the in-tourist, so we'd like to go to Benderi. And there were brochures there. Visit Benderi. So what do you want to go to Benderi for? There's nothing there whatsoever. We want to go to Benderi. So they finally got us a driver. We go to Benderi. We meet this man right in the middle of the town. And I'll tell you, there's nobody else there that looks anything like us. Everybody's either working or whatever they were doing. So we then proceed to walk through the entire town, half an hour to his house. When we arrive there already, there's a bus, small bus sitting out, or a transit. And we said, what's that? He said, that is the KGB. They're going to listen to everything that's said in my house now with you. But don't worry about it because they've been doing this with us for years and it doesn't make any difference. Okay, fine. We were there. We walked back to our driver. We get back there. The second we arrived, 2 young men with little T-shirts and little in-tourist buttons on jump out of a car and speaking in an American Midwest accent, English, they said to us, oh, we see you here in Benderi. Don't you want to see something else in Benderi? He said, we saw enough in Benderi. We want to go back to our place in Kishinev. It was an unbelievable kind of experience, and I hope some of you, now that they're going to finally build something meaningful at Babi Yar, you'll go there and see it. I'm not going to tell you what we did. If somebody wants to ask, you certainly can. But the whole trip made us understand what we needed to do as Jews to free our fellow.